Good evening. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Apologies for the late start. Thanks for bearing with us. Um, my name is John Mayo. I am the executive director of Altagether and an Altadena resident. I'd like to first acknowledge and thank our friends at My Tribe Rise, NDLON, NAACP Altadena and Pasadena, Altadena Rising, Evolve Altadena, and the Altadena Tenants Union for their support in building this event. Thanks to Parallax for helping us with the editing and to Shannon for helping pull this all together. Many of the partnerships I just listed began before the current events in LA started unfolding. So many of our partners have been very busy lately, and their voices are not represented as well as we would like them to be. Many of these partners are demanding action right now in Pasadena, and we stand with them in this effort. I want to acknowledge also that this is a really intense time in the world and in the United States with multiple events and crises that are deserving of attention. That includes the Iran-Israel war and the US bombing of Iran. It also includes ICE raids being conducted in our community, targeting our friends and neighbors. This is an incredibly difficult and frightening time for a lot of people. Unfortunately, we don't have the option of paying attention to one crisis at a time. Here in Altadena and the surrounding areas affected by the Eaton Fire, people are hurting. So we really appreciate the respect and the care that you are showing by being with us tonight. And we hope that you leave tonight not just with a better understanding of the situation on the ground and what people are facing, but with ideas about how you personally can help. I live at Madison and Sacramento, and the night the fire broke out, I was on an airplane heading back to LA, and at about 9 o'clock, I flew over the Eaton Fire and watched it climbing up the ridge from my window, wondering what this would mean for my town. I feel fortunate in that my house did not burn down, but my home did. And like the people you're going to hear from tonight, I love Altadena very much and I want to see it restored. So Altagether is a community organizing group that runs a neighborhood block captain program. We started Altagether during the fire because we wanted to help people organize their communities. 5 months later, we have nearly 150 volunteer neighborhood captains in our network. These are residents turned organizers working to connect people, to share information and resources, and to take collective action. They are brilliant and creative and compassionate people, and they want to help their neighbors and they want to help their town. Altagether is committed to an equitable recovery where people get to decide what comes next for them and for our community, not insurance companies or outside speculators or market forces. Whether you are a journalist or an elected official or a staffer, a funder, somebody from an aid organization, you have a role to play in bringing that kind of a recovery about. So tonight you're going to hear from 35 people whose lives have been upended by the Eaton Fire, each sharing their story in their own words. Some will be live, many will be video recordings. And I want to emphasize that this is a minuscule sampling of the stories that are playing out daily across the area. Most people do not have the time or the energy to advocate for themselves while they're simply trying to survive. And sharing stories can also be re-traumatizing. So we don't claim that this is a representative cross-section, just that every voice matters. Now, our purpose in sharing these stories is not simply to describe what has happened and the ongoing struggles that people are facing. It's also to try to chart a way forward to getting these people and their neighbors the help and support that they deserve, and to help Altadena and surrounding areas affected by the fire rebuild in a way that is more resilient and that stays true to the spirit and specialness of this place. So accompanying these stories, you will see on your screen direct calls to action to people in positions of power. Many of these ideas come directly from our speakers. We also sought input from our partners in the community. And these calls to action, plus many others, are also compiled into a separate document We're going to drop a link to that document into the chat. We will also distribute a full recording of this event and that document to everybody who registered afterwards. So the stories that we are going to share tonight are divided into 6 categories: failure of systems during the fire, housing and financial struggles, rebuilding and town infrastructure, insurance struggles and environmental concerns, land acquisition, support for vulnerable populations. One last thing I want to mention is that our intended main audience for this event is people in positions of power who have the ability to make an impact on the recovery here at a high level. And I want to be honest and say that some of these stories are pretty difficult and pretty upsetting. And if you are on this call as a survivor, please understand that it may be unpleasant, maybe re-traumatizing for you to hear these stories. So we encourage you to take care of yourself, leave if you need to. And for those of you who have not been directly impacted, who have some power and influence over what's happening, we deeply appreciate you being here to bear witness and to listen to what is happening in survivors' own words. And with that, we're going to start with stories related to failure of systems during the fire.
Hi everyone, I'm Whitney. I'm a mom to a spirited 4-year-old daughter, a rescue pup named Louie, a wife, and a proud but very heartbroken Altadena resident. Just 3 weeks before the fire, my husband and I bought the home we had been renting for nearly 4 years, and it was a dream come true. We were finally homeowners in beautiful Altadena. Our nervous system could finally exhale. We were also lucky enough to live next door to Barbara. She became part of our family. Barbara is 84 years young. She lives independently. She's spunky, sharp, and full of life. She looked out for us in so many ways, grabbing our mail, rolling our trash cans in, dressing up on Halloween, celebrating holidays with our daughter, sneaking fruit from our trees in our backyard. She also lived with dementia. Which brings me to the night of January 7th. We could see flames from our front door. The fire was moving fast. And my husband started packing, and all I could think about was Barbara. My daughter and I rushed over, and I told her to pack a bag and to come with us. I even offered to drive her car because she couldn't drive at night, but she said she'd wait for an official evacuation notice, or maybe walk to the church down the street. So we left around 7:30 p.m. But like everyone else, I couldn't sleep. At 3:30 in the morning, the evacuation notice finally came through, and all I could think of was Barbara. Did she hear it? Did she leave? At 7:30 a.m. on January 8th, I called, and the power was out. The service was bad. But I could hear her say, "I just checked your driveway. It's still dark, and I'm going back to bed." But it wasn't night. It was morning. The smoke was so thick that it had blacked out the sky. That's when I knew that we had to go back. My father, husband, and I drove straight into it. Power lines were down, trees were glowing, the roads were chaos, but we made it. Our home was still standing. Barbara was still there, in shock, wearing only slippers, holding her phone. We begged her to come, and she did. We got her out, and Barbara's home is now gone. And ours is the only one left on the block. And I keep thinking, what if we hadn't gone back? Who would have helped her? Barbara always looked out for us, and that day we got to look out for her. Thank you for listening. Hi, everyone.
We fled our home on West Loma Alta Drive in Altadena about 11 p.m. on January 7th as the Eaton Fire grew to our east. The winds really picked up and the power finally went out. For days, the red flag conditions had been forecast, so we had anticipated a public safety power shutdown the morning of the 7th when strong winds picked up, but the power didn't go out until the inferno was underway that night. We put belongings in the car and left. At 10:30 a.m. Wednesday morning, January 8th, our neighbor called and said our house was still standing, although our ADU was on fire. My son and I made a split-second decision to drive up and try to prevent the fire from spreading to our main house. When we got there at 10:45 a.m., the neighborhood was mostly gone, but the wind was down to a light breeze and we could fight the fire. There was no water pressure, so we got jugs of water from the neighbor's pool. Well, we fought the fire from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. We were sickened to watch many more houses burn down, and we felt such disappointment because they could have been saved if fire responders had deployed Wednesday late morning when we got there, when conditions had become safer. This would have required water tenders, but that seems like mutual equipment sharing that could have been pre-planned with neighboring counties and states. Even if they had taken 15 hours to arrive, it could have saved homes. It was such a shock and a horrible realization that nobody was coming. At 4:11 p.m., we finally saw the first firefighters. A Forest Service fire crew drove by our house. And an hour later at 5:30 p.m., we finally saw the first red fire truck from an out-of-town fire crew. But the damage was done by then, and they had no water tenders anyway. It's worth noting that the fire burned so hot that most yard irrigation systems melted and the water drained from where the plastic PVC and irrigation valves had been located. So maybe there is a lesson there to help preserve the water in the reservoirs. The burned power poles and downed electric lines everywhere were also incredibly dangerous and slowed the response. Undergrounding is so needed in Altadena. We learned that most of the homes still standing were saved by DIY firefighting, where residents fought the fire themselves, as we did. In nearby Sierra Madre, the city's firefighters stayed local in the neighborhoods and prevented the fire from sweeping into the communities. We needed something similar in Altadena. Altadena residents are clinging to the last few signs of our community that remain, and we hope County develops a plan that will prevent such tragedies in the future. Thanks for listening. We fled our home on West.
My name is Courage, and I'll never forget what I saw the 2 days and 2 nights after the fire. Because the morning after the fire, I decided to do something crazy and go up to my house to find out whether or not I still had a home. I didn't care what the risks were. And I never thought to see at the level that I did a complete and utter catastrophic failure of an institution that we pay billions to, that is supposed to save us, that decided to do nothing at all the entire week after the fire. When I arrived at 10 a.m. that first morning, there were still so many fires on my street. All the houses across the street from me were gone. Directly across from me, my neighbors' houses burnt for days. I decided to walk down the street and ran into some of my neighbors that had saved their house because they were using buckets filled with their neighbor's swimming pool water to put out the fire that had engulfed their garage. Just up the hill from them, behind their house, was a house that was completely out of control. I decided to join in and save what we could, and there was about 9 of us at the end of the afternoon. Now get this. 1, there was no wind that entire week from when I arrived at 10 a.m. on Wednesday to when I left early morning on Friday at 4 a.m. 2, there wasn't a single fire put out that we did not put out ourselves, even though there were dozens of trucks that went by, and we didn't see our first helicopter that first day until 5 p.m., and it was a newscopter. 3, we didn't even get help when we asked for it. That one house that was out of control up the hill, I ended up getting the idea of prodding a wall that was still standing to get it to collapse down on top of the fire and smother it, and so that we could take care of the rest with our buckets of water. It worked. There was even one instance where there was a power pole that had caught on fire that was too high up for us to do anything about. So when this one fire truck got near, I pointed at it and all of us got it to stop and asked if it could help. And they simply said, "How are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Well, we're obviously taking care of all the fires ourselves." And they said, "Well, glad you guys are doing okay," and kept driving. What I saw that entire week is unimaginable, and what I would end up learning for weeks and months afterwards is even more unimaginable. I now know 3 or 4 families where their houses freshly caught on fire at 10 a.m. the next day, noon the next day. People that had sprinkler systems on their roofs that ended up not working because they turned off the water so early, even though the power and the gas was left on for days. People that had fire hydrants in front of their houses that ended up burning that were not used at all. Streets that had fire hydrants that were left open to leak on the streets, not even used. We have had no answers at all as far as what exactly happened that first week because there's been no transparency from the fire department. All we have kind of heard as far as the word on the street is that there was a stand down, save people, not structures order because there was some contractual disagreement between relevant parties that made it to where we did not have enough water in our fire hydrants when we needed it. And that's probably the reason why they have not been transparent about this. We deserve, at the very least, brutal accountability. My name is Courage.
Voices from the Ground, I'm Mary, telling the story of 3 households and how systems we counted on failed us utterly. What the hell happened? My Watch Duty app alerted me almost immediately to the fire. Later, I watched the video of the spark from the tower, the spark that destroyed our homes and town and killed 18 of us. How could Southern California Edison be so merciless? What the hell happened? We got no evacuation notices on our apps. Our friends and family kept urging us to leave. When we finally saw flames on the street behind us, we escaped. There was no evacuation notice until 3:30 a.m. that morning. What the hell happened? Our 84-year-old neighbor was going to bed, certain the evacuation notice would wake her. Another neighbor refused to let her go to sleep, and they evacuated together. Her house burned to the ground, burning every possession from her 84 years. But for our neighbor, she would have been counted among the dead in the fire. What the hell happened? Around the block early the next morning, a neighbor drove back to her house. Thank God her house was there, but it had caught fire. LA County firefighters everywhere were standing down. They weren't fighting fires. No one was helping. Where were the helpers? What the hell happened? She and her family tried to put out the fire, but there was no water pressure. The flames next door had caught her house, but there was no water to fight the fire. What did we hear later? Water contract negotiations had been stalled? Stop your fighting and help your neighbors. What the hell happened? But Kern County firefighters were not standing down. They came to the rescue. They pulled up to our neighbor's house and promised to save her house and the 2 next door. The captain told her he wanted her to live 40 more years in her house. The captain and the crew got to work. They were not standing down. What the hell happened? Kern County firefighters put out the fire, saving our neighbors' houses, but they weren't done. They drove around the corner to our street. They had seen our house catch fire and rushed inside with their hose. They saved our house. But where were the LA County firefighters? What the hell happened? What happened to the systems that we trusted? Our water, our power, our fire department, our county leadership. We demand a full investigation of the Eaton Fire protocols. I want to know what the hell happened so this never happens again.
On January 7th, 2025, the Eaton Fire broke out in the hills above Altadena. That being bad enough as it is, it happened during a high wind condition which forced the flames down the hill into residential areas. Mine was one of them. I tried chasing embers around the neighborhood, putting out what I could, but it was just not enough. There was no support. There was no fire department. I can understand helicopters and airplanes being grounded, but no ground crews. There was nothing. I was on my own. At one time, there was a pair of bulldozers parked at the top of lake, but they left. This is the last picture I got of my house before I bid it a fond farewell and wished it good luck. Unfortunately, that was the last picture ever taken of this house. At about 1:30 at night, I decided to get out of the neighborhood. The fire was getting a bit close, starting to engulf some structures, and on my way out, this is our only road in and out, the ground cover on the right was burning. Fortunately, I had decided to leave then, or I might have been trapped. The heat was enough to crack the windshield of my truck. The next morning, this is a view heading from Devil's Gate Dam towards Altadena. Not very promising. Crossing Woodbury and trying to head back to my house, I noticed a couple of structures on fire down by Woodbury, and there's no fire trucks there. Oh, well, here they are. They're finally heading into the area, it looks. Got quite a procession. The cavalry have arrived. A bit too late, though. My neighborhood of 36 houses, I think there was only 4 or 5 that survived, and those had quite a bit of smoke damage. The rest were literally burnt to the ground. This is driving into my neighborhood. Smoke still hanging in the air. Nothing but devastation. This was my father-in-law's house. He's a widower and a long-time resident. Much like the people around our neighborhood, they lost everything. And across Altadena, there are the few and the fortunate whose houses did make it through the fire. Now, I don't know what went wrong, but there was very little response. We had no fire department in our area. I don't know if there was water pressure or not after Edison had shut the power off, but it just seems that something more could have been done. Losing such a vast area of Altadena is really inexcusable. Well, thank you very much for providing me your time to show this presentation. Altadena strong. From the ashes we shall build a better day.
Hello, this is Daryl Valencia,
I'm Jessica Valencia.
and we are here to talk about the lack of response that we experienced on the night of the fires in Altadena. And I guess what stands out most is that, well, a couple things. One, we had electricity going on all through the night. We never received an evacuation order. We evacuated around 10, yeah, that night, 10:30. No one on our block ever received an evacuation order. We never saw a fire truck come up and down our street. And this is well into the night after we saw flames and, wind ripping through the mountains.
And in fact, at around 8:30 p.m., we had driven up to Farnsworth Park to kind of assess the situation, which is about 3 blocks up from our house. And we saw a lot of fire trucks and police officers just parked in the parking lot at Farnsworth Park, looking at the mountains, drinking coffee, but didn't have any sense of urgency. So it gave us sort of like a sense of calm. So we went back home because we were thinking, well, if they're not sending out notices and they're not driving around and asking people to evacuate, then we must be okay. Maybe the fire is moving in another direction, and we don't have a lot to worry about. So we went back home, and we had our pets in the car, we had our kids in the car, we had a bag packed, and at 8:30 we went back home. We were like, well, if they're not worried, we're not worried.
Yeah, and I think our story kind of coincides with a lot of people we talked to that night who, again, never received any evacuation orders, never saw fire trucks, any emergency responders. We had electricity going well into 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So I think the issue is we felt abandoned, and some of our neighbors never made it out, and we just want to make sure that in the event there's a fire again in our community, which there will be, that we're prepared and that we're not left feeling alone and abandoned. So hopefully these stories will reach people who have the ability to make these decisions, to make sure that we can hold ourselves accountable and keep our community safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
This is Patrick Rainey giving a brief testimony of what happened, the Eaton Fire. We'd gotten news that fire was spreading. We didn't get any evacuation warnings or any mandatory evacuations, but I did see some for west of Lake Avenue. My neighbor, we both decided to go out, I guess, every 10 to 15 minutes just to check. And then we could see the fire going up the hill towards the northwest direction, which would mean it's coming towards us. We were hoping that, nothing would happen. We didn't see anybody out there as far as firefighters, anything like that. There were no warnings. There were no mandatory evacuation notices or on anything that I had seen. The electricity went out eventually, and that's when we hit panic mode. And we just grabbed what we could and put it in my car. Certainly didn't grab enough, and it was just weird because we're leaving. It's pitch black. It's very quiet, seemingly, and we're just driving down. And again, there were no emergency vehicles, nothing, no sirens, nothing. Didn't hear anything. It was just the weirdest thing. There was the fire in '93, I believe it was called the Kinaloa fire. And it was up the hill. Obviously, it wasn't as windy as it was this time, but it was going up the hill. It seemed like it was closer to us than it was than this time. And firefighters were all over the place. They knocked on our door. They told us, to evacuate, and we did. And then we were able to go back. This is back in '93. We were able to go back the next day, and I think everything was contained or it was out, one or the other. But we were allowed to go back the next day. This time, my neighbor Daryl was able to get up into Altadena in the morning. He let us know that everything was gone. Our entire neighborhood was just burned out, had been destroyed. All of these neighborhoods in Altadena, firefighters, they didn't even show up. It's so many areas, maybe the entire area of Altadena and Sierra Madre. Yeah, we pay the highest taxes in the nation in almost every category. Property tax is supposed to go for, firefighting and emergency response, and this is what happens. To say the least, we residents of Altadena and Sierra Madre and surrounding areas, we definitely didn't get what we paid for emergency response. There should have been more than there was in '93 with all the population growth and everything, but there was nothing this time around.
You're muted, Michael.
Hello, I'm sorry about that. My name is Michael Farah. I'm an Altadena resident. We did survive the fire. Our house survived the fire, but our whole community pretty much did not. The night of the fire, it was a windy night, but it was like any other day. What had happened is we had seen an orange glow in front of us. I live up in the Rubio Highlands, which is a little north west of Eaton Canyon. So Eaton Canyon is almost our view. And what had happened is it just kept creeping up the hill. A lot of our neighbors started, interacting with one another. And, a lot of people were kind of laughing the situation off because they've experienced it so many times before. Just like any other fire, a lot of them, what go around helping one another out, talking with one another, and letting everyone know, hey, maybe we should evacuate. Come to find out later on, a lot of people evacuated. Some people didn't even take their passports. They didn't even take anything with them, thinking it's just going to be another night. Firefighters going to come in and do their thing. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Our electricity was still on up until almost 10 p.m. Minutes after they came around telling us to evacuate, which we did. I was almost in denial. Went to the valley to my parents' father-in-law's house, and just watching the news throughout the night, and couldn't believe what I was seeing on the news. Come to find out, the next morning we have an email thread with some of our neighbors. By 2 a.m., it had already crept in and knocked out of 80 homes. Again, about 60 to 65 homes were destroyed. Got back up to the area the next morning in shock. 8 a.m. It felt like we were driving through an apocalypse. It was embers flying everywhere, things on fire. People crouched down crying. Pretty much lost everything. Um, when we got up to our area, we saw our house was safe. A lot of our neighbors had their house was brand newly on fire, and it was about, I would say, 9 a.m. My father, which is 75 years old, my brother, my brother-in-law, myself, and my fiance were starting to put out as many embers and reignited fires the best we could. We were getting buckets of pool water from, unfortunately, our neighbor's home that didn't even make it to fight these fires. We never saw firefighters. For the next 2 days, we were doing the same exact thing. I felt like we were let down from our leadership. I mean, I don't want to put all the blame on the firefighters. They're doing what they had to do or what they were told to do, but the leadership is what really failed us. I still cannot imagine. I still can't believe what had happened till today. It's the scariest thing I've ever witnessed. It still, again, stresses me out, and I don't know what to say. It's just the craziest experience ever, and I really want some answers. We all want some answers. Altadena is so beautiful. We deserve answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And now we've got our last story on the topic of failure of systems during the fire.
I met Ed 35 years ago on the road. We were both truckers doing the same job for different companies. Became friends and palled around together. We both collected way too many cars, and he had about 9 different vehicles that burnt in the fire. He pretty much outlived all his family, so my family became his family. You know, if I wasn't over here with Ed, we talked every night, 7 o'clock. So Ed wasn't big on answering the phone, so he knew I would call every night at 7 o'clock, he'd answer. And we talked up until almost 8 o'clock. We knew the things were on fire. It was 3 miles away and burning east. And Ed and I had been through several fires here already, seen these mountains on fire. And he said, it looks like it's going to be okay. There's nothing near me. And went to bed. And then, 3 o'clock in the morning, the winds changed, the fire, changed, and it swept up through the canyon and come down and just burnt the town down. Well, I got up the next morning and saw what was going on, jumped in the car and came over here immediately. Once I got to Ed's and I could see that the place was level and that his pickup truck was in the driveway burnt down, I knew that this was going to be bad. And so I got out, I went up and I checked. It's a large piece of property. So I thought, in the event that maybe he got out, now Ed walked with a cane, he still drove, but the fact that his pickup truck was in the driveway led me to believe he didn't make it out. But I still had to search the entire property, thinking if he got out, got up under a tree or something, because there were some trees that were just burned on the bottom. But I searched the property, none to be found. And then from there, I started videoing, and because I wanted to document this. About, 2 or 3 minute videos. After a couple, I realized I'd kind of put myself in danger because there were way too many houses still on fire, and there could be routes blocked to get out. So I decided I better get out of there. From there, I went to the sheriff and filed a missing persons report. And then from there, started hitting the evacuation centers every day until the coroner finally told me that, they had found the remains where I had told the detectives he slept. So we know that he died in his sleep. Well, Ed was hard of hearing, and he took his hearing aids out when he went to bed. So he wouldn't hear a lot of stuff, but he could hear loudspeakers on the street. He could hear explosions because of the 4th of July. He would hear the fireworks. Had anybody have been up in the driveway or anywhere close, even the streets with bullhorns, whether it be the police or fire, he'd have heard that and looked out to see what was going on. In looking out, he would have known, I got to get out of here, and left, in my opinion. Well, Ed was, my best friend, and so it's been a shock to lose him. It would be even a more shock had he have got out and saw that everything he ever loved was gone. So, I don't know if there's a blessing to be found in this. I had kind of reserved myself to thinking that Ed and I, would be together until one of us, died. And I had no idea it was coming like this.
Now we're going to hear stories related to housing and financial struggles.
My name is Micah, and I'm an Altadena mom. I didn't lose everything in the Eaton Fire. I just lost my town. I'm actually recording this from my house, which is much more than many Altadenans can say. I myself refused to believe it until I was in my home, in a new bed, 143 nights later. My family is one of the lucky ones. We evacuated when our neighbors knocked on our door to show us the fire starting in the canyon. We didn't have to wait for a notification to go out or not go out. We were even so fortunate to only relocate twice, thanks to friends, work, and the privilege of having responsive insurance. As grateful as I was to have a solid roof over our heads, our last rental was oppressive. Imagine having a bad landlord and then having to pay them 2.5 times the normal rate. 2 beds, 2 baths, $10,000 a month. It's cheaper to stay at the actual resort where they filmed the 3rd season of The White Lotus, $100 cheaper per night, than to stay at the rental we were stuck in for months. And that place was no vacation. Every cup, glass, and mug came from my unlivable house in our burnt out town. The landlords took advantage of all of us and also took us all for desperate and dumb. They intentionally listed each of their individual properties on separate rental websites so that they couldn't be traced. And it worked. Every single one of those units was inhabited by another family from Altadena. We were all united in loss and slim pickings. I redlined our agreements and cited them for false advertising across all these platforms. And they responded by replacing deposits for new fees and falling silent. When we left the rental, I washed my hands of the emotional investment in the money we'd wasted and got to washing the heavy metals out of my family's clothing. Rent gouging is kicking an entire community when it's down. And until there are real, responsive rental protections for emergency survivors, my community will continue to be down and out.
My name is Kim Jones, and I was born and raised in Altadena, California. So the home that burned down was the home that I had been living in all my life. I am second generation to be in that home. That home was my mother's home. Both my brother and I were raised in that home. But for me, that was a home that I don't know anywhere else. That's the only place I've ever lived in California. So it was my mother, who was elderly, myself, and then my 16-year-old son.
What it's like applying for aid is really confusing because it's not a simple question. We're 2 households in one. So when you're applying for aid, it's hard for me because I'm my own household living within my mother's home. And so for most of what I apply for, I have to include her, even though technically we're under the same roof, but we're 2 separate households. The best aid would be housing, affordable housing. And that's the one thing that really, it really scares me. I know it's a lot of people out there who are just like me. Their homes were paid for. Their monthly expenses were less than what the rent market is today. You know, I feel lucky for the fact that we were able to find a place, because I see a lot of people are still going from hotel to hotel. the most useful form of aid is for longevity, home ownership. How do you go from living in a home to living in a camper in somebody's parking lot? So if I don't travel back to Pasadena, then a lot of times I don't hear of the information. I mean, I'm on social media, but it's not the same. And I know that for a lot of residents who can't physically be in Pasadena, they've missed out on a lot of information. For the longer term, no organization has offered any type of case management. I'm just really on my own to figure out what my next move is.
My name. Hi, I'm Nicole. My husband Mike and I lost our home in the Eaton Fire. It was our first house. We poured our hearts into every part of it, from the turquoise front door to the garden in the back. I used to stop in the driveway when I left every day just to take it in. It felt like ours in the truest sense of the word. Since the fire, we've been in survival mode. Insurance is a daily battle. The mortgage company is holding our funds in an account we can't touch. And building back, it's not just expensive, it's unpredictable. Materials are getting more expensive every day. New codes require solar, sprinklers, and upgrades no one planned for. And our policy doesn't come close to covering all of it. People often say, well, at least you had insurance. But what they don't understand is that no one was insured for this, for the total loss, for the price surge, for the trauma of itemizing every piece of your life to prove it mattered. And my husband, Mike, he's a cyclist. He was a recreational gardener, and that's how he kept himself steady in early sobriety. The fire didn't just take our home. It took his trails, his tools, his peace. And every day has been a struggle for him to find meaning again. What we need now, what all survivors need, is help we can actually use. Not money tied in red tape. Not grants that depend on your income. We need direct donations. Because with that support, we can save, we can plan, and we can rebuild without crushing debt. Direct aid doesn't just build homes, it builds hope. It lets survivors focus on healing and not just fighting systems. So if you're wondering how to help, that's how. Give directly. Help families get back to the life they worked so hard to build, and we will take it from there.
Now stories about rebuilding and town infrastructure. And thank you everybody for hanging on here. We got a slightly late start so we're a little behind schedule, but we have a lot of great stories left for you to hear.
Hi, I'm Joan Reback. I'm a former resident of Altadena and hope to be again. My plans have been submitted for my new home, but I have some major concerns and fears. This has not been an easy path to traverse. And one of my biggest fears right now is that my insurance company will not promise to insure a new house that I build. So people who are facing the prospect of rebuilding have to know that they can get insurance on their house if it's built, and they have to know that they can afford insurance on their house when it's built. And this is something I desperately hope that somehow legislation can address. It is essential. The other fear I have is that all of these fabulous people who have arisen with goodwill to take on different aspects of the rebuilding of Altadena are not coordinated. There is no real leadership. And all of these groups, all of these people need to be coordinated, and we need leadership, and we need a real solid vision of what Altadena is going to look like in the future so that people understand why it's important to stay in our town. If we have a lot of developers that are paying a lot of money to buy lots, then they're going to be, what are they going to put on there to justify the money that they're spending for the lots? We don't know. We don't know whether zoning is going to be easily manipulated. We don't know what's happening with our commercial corridors. We don't know anything about what the future of Altadena holds. And this, I feel, is imperative. And not only does it need to be done, it needs to be done with the voices of the people of Altadena, not by outside voices, not by people who have a commercial interest, but by the people of Altadena. And whoever are the representatives, they need to be speaking to the people. And we need a solid plan that we can see and have input into. We need leadership. Hi.
Hi, my name is Allie, and I'm a block captain in Altadena. My husband and I lost our home in the Eaton Fire, like so many of our neighbors, and I'm trying to help my neighbors access the information that they need in order to rebuild if that's what they're choosing to do. Recently, I sent out an email to the neighbors in my zone about getting a geotechnical or soils report for their lots, which is something our contractor had said that he needed to give to his structural engineer before the design process started, so that we could design a strong and effective foundation that wouldn't crack in the future. And I got a few emails back from neighbors saying that their architects and structural engineers said that they didn't need such a report. And I have no idea what that report is. This is not something most of us have ever navigated or wanted to navigate. Most of us in Altadena never wanted to build a home and are really starting from square one with little knowledge about how this all works. And so we're educating each other as we go along, talking to contractors, talking to people at the county, and trying to figure things out together. So I asked the county if a geotechnical soils report would be required for permitting, as our contractor had told us that he had never built a home where it wasn't required for permitting. And they asked me my address, and I told them, and they said that for our lot, yes, it would be required in order to get a building permit. Then I asked them if there was a map or a list somewhere that I could share with my neighbors so they could see if their lot would require such a report in order to get a building permit, and they said no. And I know the county is really overrun with just so many tasks right now, as are all of the residents, and we're all trying to kind of help each other get to that finish line. But it would be really helpful if there were some kind of clear, organized, easy to access information coming from the county about what steps we need to take, what things we need to consider, what kinds of people we need to hire, what kinds of reports we need to get, what will need to be filed with the county, and what will be required for permitting. I've seen little bits of this here and there, but if there was just something clear and easy to access that block captains, for instance, could send to our neighbors, that they could then send to their contractors, just so that we all have a better understanding of what is expected of us in this process, it would be very, very helpful. Thanks.
So I'm an Altagether block captain, Lauren. I live in Altadena. I say live in, even though our house is a total loss, because it's still my home, with my 2 daughters, dog, and husband. And we lost our home in the Eaton Fire. Once we lost our home, what brought us together is our neighbors and our community, and staying in contact and sharing information with each other. One of the things that happened very early on is my 2 direct neighbors decided we would rebuild together. And once all of us were on board, it became real. Like, we're doing this, we're rebuilding. And what we hope to find out of this were benefits in saving costs with construction, architects, materials later down the line. And with this in mind, I organized a meeting with an architect I trusted and we hadn't signed with, and it was no pressure. And we had about 10 or 11 neighbors come together and join this Zoom meeting, where the architects didn't sell to us, but they just wanted to provide information to our community on initial fire hardening, building, what you expect in working with an architect, and kind of the process and timelines moving forward to rebuild. And out of this came 5 of us on our street on Glen Rose, actually signing with the same architecture firm. And what has now become something really special between the 5 of us, because now we know that all the negotiating power that we talk about throughout all of us rebuilding is happening, at least with the 5 of us, on a smaller level, which will hopefully grow to an even larger level as we start to rebuild together. So now instead of having 5 construction managers for our project, there's 1 manager, and those costs can be split between all of us. And hopefully that as the construction crews come in, and our architects have already worked to negotiate. Ours is a story of leveraging our community buying power, our neighborhood, and that negotiation. And my hope is that the 5 of us working together becomes a model for more neighbors and communities in Altadena to work with their neighbors to rebuild together, whether it's using the same architects, construction companies, because we hear it again and again, but we're stronger together, right? We are stronger working together and uplifting one another than we are working alone and being alone. So mine is the story of working together.
Hi everyone. Hopefully you can see my screen. So my name is Morgan Whirlage, block captain of Zone 36, and AKA the Guru of Doo-Doo, as I'm now known. You can see I lived here on this map. This is a map of Altadena. This also happens to be a map of all of the unsewered areas of Altadena that you can see in the orange. The blue lines represent the areas that can potentially be sewer extensions. So you'll see how many areas that is. Myself, along with 600 other residents, are living with on-site wastewater treatment systems, which is the technical language for septic and sewer systems. So what's the dilemma here? 1 in 10 people rebuilding in Altadena are not connected to public sewer, 1 in 10. The problem is sort of invisible because until you actually start to design your house and go to the permit shop, you don't realize how many regulations are around sewage systems and on-site wastewater treatment systems. So a lot of people might not even know they're dealing with this problem. It's also very expensive. Sewer systems can run, or on-site wastewater treatment systems can run up to $150,000, typically not covered by your homeowner's insurance. And ultimately, sewers are much preferable to on-site wastewater treatment systems because they're better for the environment and easy to design around. So I've been focused on this issue. And as a community, what we've done is we've started a work group around this issue. This is going to be a huge problem for people that are rebuilding that are on septic and cesspool systems. Our work group has nearly 100 members. We, share info and answer questions. We also are working with a county civil engineer. You have to petition as a community to allow the county to do a design for a sewer system. So it's on the residents that need this in order to petition. A lot of residents don't even know this is an issue and might not even know it's an advantage to have a sewer extended into their communities. And we also push for fairness in permitting. We are able to get the county to grant us like for like grandfather in some of the existing on-site wastewater treatment systems for like rebuild. So that was a big win. So what do we need? We obviously need funding. This is going to be a very expensive problem for people. It's estimated that all those blue lines and all those orange areas in the map that I showed can be up to 100 million to sewer that area. And residents should not be expected to burden the entire cost of that. We need more resources. Right now, there's only 1 engineer who is working on this at the county. She has a team of people, but it's just her. She's in charge of this whole project. She typically deals with 2 to 3 sewer projects a year. Now she has dozens on her plate, and she also has to deal with other improvement projects for the county. And she's been the one applying for grants and loans all by herself. So we need some creative financing options. There's great case studies on how to do this. There's loans, there's grants, but they need to be accessed through government applications, county applications, and philanthropic endeavors. I see this as an opportunity to help Altadena build back, to protect the environment, to modernize our infrastructure. None of us wanted this. This isn't the opportunity we wanted, but we can look at it that way and hopefully help people. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you so much. I think sewers can be a model for other infrastructure and building needs, and I hope we can get this done. I've included my contact in case anyone would like more information and a link to our work group. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Morgan. And now we've got another live speaker, Tim.
I'm not able to start my video.
It's okay, we're hearing your voice. There we go.
Okay, great. So my friend Morgan talking about water out. I'm going to talk about water in for a moment. There are three main water purveyors in Altadena: Lincoln Avenue, Los Flores, and Rubio Canyon, along with some of the outlying areas have a few others, whether it's Quinola Mesa or Pasadena. For a town, let's call us, of that few people, that's a lot of different water companies that deliver our water. And we know from the fire, there was a pretty big failure in the ability to deliver water to fire hydrants during the fire, in addition to people's own homes and backyards. I think consolidating the water purveyors into a unified district would be the way to resolve that, so that there are better safety precautions for future fires or future disasters where we don't run out of water so quickly. And that model can be applied to other communities too, to say, in any WUI area, wildland urban interface, let's have analysis of how the water is delivered, what the backups are. If the power company turns off the power, do you have a diesel generator to run your municipal water pumps? Seems like a fairly simple ask. The second point is that when you have a consolidated water district, it's my understanding that there's additional state funding that can be applied for, where these smaller and more credit union looking water companies that are basically owned by the landowners for $1 buy-in, those are not able to apply for as much funding. So I think unifying the water district, even while we preserve our unincorporated nature to Altadena, would be a good idea. Next topic, not so much in infrastructure, but in planning and permitting. As we've heard before, there's a lot of confusion across the board on how to rebuild and what are the steps and what are the regulations for rebuilding. One of the things that we've found is even as the Department of Regional Planning has tried to assist and lessen certain zoning regulations that were not necessarily in best practice during a disaster relief scenario, we found a lot of mixed messaging and communication breakdown on what the regulations are. So I would ask for clear directives from planning and building departments that are clearly disseminated through their ranks so that a homeowner can go into the desk at a one-stop shop and get the same answer every time, and get the same answer from the top brass as you get from the people working the desk. That's all for me.
Thanks, Tim. Now we've got 2 stories left on this subject of rebuilding and town infrastructure.
Hi everyone, my name is Rich Reber. I'm an Altadena resident. My home is near the top of Lake Avenue. It's one of the few homes up there to have survived, blessing and a curse. What I wanted to do is spend a couple minutes talk about fire hardening homes and the fire hardened construction. First off, why do we need to fire harden our homes? Well, it's really a team sport. What we need to do is get Altadena built back in a way that is more resilient to wildfires, because what we saw in the Eaton Fire is the new norm for our climate. We are going to see larger fires, longer fire seasons, and stronger Santa Anas as our climate evolves. And since our climate is evolving, our home construction needs to evolve with it. Fire hardened construction also contributes to your energy safety. So part of good fire hardened construction is double paned windows, but we also need double paned windows per the energy code, so you're hitting 2 birds with 1 stone. And I do want to mention that fire hardened construction is not that much more expensive. There are studies out there that show the delta cost between a comparable home built to the fire standards and not is only about $20,000. For me, I have to retrofit my own home, so that's, out of my pocket. And I do want to mention that the SBA loans will cover risk mitigation, and this is, flatly right in that category. So if your insurance is not paying for, a new roof, you can get a new roof and, basically say that roof is part of my fire hardening, and ergo, the SBA loan applies. And the final thing I want to say is that, fire hardening is a team sport. Everyone has to be resilient to fire to make the whole neighborhood better. So we all need to get on board. We all need to make it happen. And that is what I wanted to say. You guys can find me. My name is Rich Reber, Rieber. And that's my story. Hopefully, this kicks things off and we can build Altadena back in a more resilient way. Thank you so much.
In some parts of Altadena, just as in Malibu and Maui, we have neighborhoods on cesspools and septic systems, otherwise known as outs. Those systems need to be inspected, and if they were damaged either by the fires or during the debris removal process, then they must be replaced with upgraded models. The cost of such a system can reach up to $150,000. Even if your system survived, your ability to rebuild would be limited based on that existing system. An extension of existing sewer lines into our communities would benefit everybody, especially those who are trying to rebuild. In Malibu, their city council has approved this upgrade and is actively searching for funding sources. In Maui, the local government was able to secure funding for that upgrade as well. In Altadena, neighborhood groups are assigned this task. Sometimes just a few people who are constantly reaching out to public works, who are searching for grant money and trying to figure out creative financing. We're doing this because we have been told that upgrading our sewer lines is a community-funded project, which means that we have to pay for it ourselves, unlike the homes in the Palisades and unlike the homeowners in Maui. In addition for paying for the sewer line to come through our communities, sometimes the existing sewer lines are only 200 to 300 feet away. We also have to pay to connect from our home to the sewer line, which could be up to $10,000. But there are other aspects of this undergrounding that people don't think about. Southern California Edison is undergrounding many of the electrical wires, which is a great thing. But again, individual homeowners are responsible for connecting their home to that electric system, which can, again, be up to $10,000 to connect, as reported by the LA Times. It is not okay that those of us who are making 100 decisions a day, thousands of decisions per week to just try to get back home to our home, have to also rally the government to provide us with a basic system that most people in LA County and in other states have automatically. It is wrong to make the homeowners pay for that upgrade, especially when the sewer lines already exist so close by to our communities. We are asking LA County and Public Works to find a way to fund this project, to work with the neighborhoods, individuals, neighborhood captains, to get these projects moving, and for the process to be fair. If Palisades is getting funding, and if Maui was able to find funding, I think that Altadena deserves to have that funding too.
All right, at this point, we have 16 stories left, 3 categories, starting with insurance struggles and environmental concerns. Then we'll have a couple stories on land acquisition, and then we'll close out with vulnerable populations. So 16 stories remaining. Thank you all so much for hanging in there.
Hello, my name is Seema Siraj, and I'm a homeowner in Altadena who lost her home in the Eaton Canyon fire. I also am a neighborhood captain with Altagether. I'm here to speak about 3 different parts of the insurance process that are problematic, predatory, and that ultimately can really impact a family's ability to rebuild. One of them is the personal property and personal contents inventory requirement. Most insurance companies offer a personal contents part of the policy. They offer you in your policy, I'd say it's an upward limit of $200,000 to replace everything in your home. So you would think when you buy that policy that if something does happen, you would be able to receive that payout. However, there's a stipulation on it. My insurance company, State Farm, requires a personal inventory to go along with that. So what this means is that after the natural disaster, I am required to build a spreadsheet of every single thing that I ever had in my home, where we're already dealing with grief, in some cases a lot of PTSD, and then the sheer level of logistics of trying to replace everything that we had, remembering everything we lost, is quite taxing. The second thing I want to speak to is the dwelling coverage. At least with my insurance company, the estimates are documented in, for example, a 100-page PDF, line item by line item. In this room, you need this many planks of this type of wood for the floor. Every single room has something that's that specific. So my contractor's estimate obviously does not have that level of detail. And then my insurance company's estimate is incorrect. It's missing everything from entire pieces of flooring to entire staircases. One of my neighbors is missing an entire bedroom and bathroom in her estimate. But it is the homeowner's responsibility, or if they hire a public adjuster, to go through and to refute every single thing in that estimate. This could be the difference of hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know very few people that have received a dwelling estimate to rebuild their home that accurately reflects the home and the prices for the items. And this will severely impact Altadena's ability to rebuild. The third thing I want to speak to is insurance payouts and how those correlate with mortgage lenders. Let's say my insurance company gives me a check for, let's say, $300,000 for my dwelling, for example. That check then goes to the mortgage lender. It does not go exclusively to me. I don't get to hold it. The lender gets to hold it because I have a mortgage. In that case, it goes into an escrow account and it accrues 0% interest. I believe that California state legislation should work to require for these escrow accounts to accrue at least 2% interest, so that the value that we're getting from our insurance companies is not going down in the year or 2 or 3 that it takes to rebuild the home. I'm hopeful that we can work together to make the path to rebuilding easier, smoother, and more successful. Thank you. Hello.
Hi. My name is Andrew Lansford, and I lost my home in the Eaton fires. But I'm what most consider to be one of the lucky ones. My insurance coverage was sufficient, and so far, my insurance company has done the right thing. I received a payment for my entire building coverage A within a month after the fire. I quickly did a little math on the back of that envelope and discovered that I could cover my entire monthly mortgage payment by placing that payment into a standard high-yield savings account. However, when a home that's securing a mortgage is destroyed or damaged, mortgagors are named as payees on the check and are also entitled to hold any insurance payments up to the full mortgage balance as security on the loan. It's the law, it's in the contract. I signed up for that when I signed my mortgage. I didn't know it on the day I signed my mortgage, but I can get behind it. I entered into a long-term partnership with my bank, and I want my partner to be secure. The house is gone, and they need that security. What nobody knew is that while they're holding on to your insurance payout, the bank doesn't have to pay any interest, and this needs to change. This isn't a problem that affects very few people. In the Eaton Fire, over 4,300 single-family homes were destroyed. 79% had mortgage, and 90% of those also had insurance. Over 3,000 Altadena households are receiving 0% interest on their insurance payouts. This isn't a problem that has no impact. With the average California mortgage balance in the range of about $440,000, this means that for just the Eaton fires, around $1.3 billion is potentially locked away in escrow accounts. $1.3 billion that homeowners can't access, $1.3 billion that the banks are not paying interest on, but $1.3 billion that the banks could use to enrich themselves. If every dollar of that $1.3 billion were in a normal low-risk, high-yield savings account at 3.6 APR, the 3,000 Altadena households would be receiving an additional $49 million each year in interest. That's an average of $16,000 per year per household. There's a California law that regulates banks and impound accounts. It's intended for us to receive a minimum of 2% interest on those funds. But banks have found a loophole to exploit us, the victims of a disaster, and are paying nothing. Without the loophole, 3,000 Altadena households in this situation would each be entitled to, on average, $9,000 per year in interest. That's enough to pay for the materials for a mid-sized solar setup or pipe a home for fire sprinklers. Over the course of an average length, 2 years rebuild, it's enough to pay for both. California Assemblymember Harabedian's bill, AB 493, closes the 0% loophole and requires banks to pay the minimum standard of 2% interest. Support this bill and make it law. This bill is a great start, but it is not enough. It closes a loophole in California only. Mortgagors will continue to operate in this predatory manner in other states, benefiting off of us, the victims of disaster. We need change to banking regulation at the national level. A common sense, decent, and fair approach to the situation is the least that we can give to homeowners who are suffering potentially one of the worst things they'll ever have to face. Let's make some change with interest. Thank you for your time.
Hello everyone, my name is Dave Zemed and I used to live in Altadena. I've been displaced now for 6 months and I have relatively no timeline for return as my house looks exactly as it did on January 7th. I think the hardest part about being displaced and in my situation is that it's a really lonely place to be. It feels like there's very little guidance in terms of what is safe and what is proper protocols for returning home after your house has been infiltrated with toxic elements. And there's no real guidance from our insurance companies or our government on how we should proceed. So it is a very lonely road with my neighbors to figure out how do we get back into our homes. And we are all trying to figure it out one step at a time. I think as somebody with a standing structure, my biggest challenge has been dealing with the insurance. They certainly don't want to do what feels like is the right thing. Whereas other insurance companies seem to be doing better. For example, USAA seems to be a very stand-up insurance company. Whereas my company, State Farm, has dragged everything out and has made me go out of pocket thousands of dollars and subsequently hire lawyers in order to negotiate on my behalf. I have found this to be extremely frustrating, especially since I've been a customer of this company for a long time, and there's really no support network beyond the media to help me move the ball forward. Yes, I can complain to the governor's office. Yes, we have gone on media, but there are no clear protocols on what insurance companies are supposed to do and what we're supposed to do, and it's extremely frustrating. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, my name is Rachel Kenny. I'm a neighborhood co-captain in West Altadena. I live with my husband and our daughter, who was 5 months old when we were evacuating. we were displaced from our standing home that had smoke damage and wind damage. We put in a claim to California Fair Plan, and we did get an inspection with our field adjuster on January 28th. So we went through the home. I showed them my self-lead test of a positive lead test on the baby's changing table in the nursery, and the ash particulates that had come in through the windows and the doors. All of that was recorded and seemingly documented, but never made available to us. So as a family, we worked to get a written report of that inspection, which we never received. And from there, we knew that the water supply initially was not good. Potential for benzene in the water. That allowed us to get 3 months of fair rental value paid for. But after those 3 months, because the water was good and we weren't within 250 yards of the nearest burned structure, we were more like 500 yards instead of 250. We no longer got any payment after those 3 months. Verbally, we could tell that the desk adjuster knew our home was unlivable. We had confirmed positive lead test from the professional CAH, not just my self-test that we paid for out of pocket. But even though the home was unlivable, they wouldn't pay for us to live anywhere else or us to live there. We ended up paying out of pocket to get the home back to pre-fire condition. So that's what our saga was with Cal Fair Plan. We are still working to try and get to a resolution, knowing that we as the homeowners have brought the home back to pre-fire condition. We purchased a new roof. We got insulation for the home, the detached garage, exterior power washing, the full clean out of the home. All of that was out of pocket that we were able to fortunately figure out how to pay for, especially with the SBA loan, but all of it coming from our own money instead of from our policy that covers seemingly what happened to our home. So we're hoping to find a good resolution moving forward and to help other families that have been experiencing the same thing. Thank you.
All right, and our next speaker is another live storyteller, Darlene. Darlene, are you with us?
I am here. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. My name is Darlene Nipper. I'm an Altadena resident, live at the intersection of Fair Oaks and just the block above Mariposa, and right on the border between West Altadena and East Altadena, 1 block east. And my family, my partner and our 12-year-old, we lost, and our 3 cats, we lost everything in the fire. The house is gone. And the insurance stories that you're hearing are very real. There's a very different experience between different companies. And as someone who's dealing with State Farm, it's just a tragedy. It's really ridiculous what they're doing. Everything from stalling on the original dwelling response. They sent out some adjuster who was a temporary person within days after they came out at the end of January, early February. He couldn't be found, and no one informed us anything about it. It was very sad. I was looking for the guy. I talked to the main person that was my contact, and finally, after a month and a half of trying to find this guy, I find out that the guy doesn't even work for State Farm anymore, which is a bad insurance practice, and I know that many of you know how this goes. Before he left, he never really asked any questions about the property except a few questions. I tried to give him as much information as I could. I know that he saw the site, but in the end, he tried to give us an estimate that was below $300,000 for a house that we had just bought within the last 5 years, which is ridiculous. And then on top of it, I think the struggle of this requirements that we're having to go through at a time of great loss and grief for the whole community, it's outlandish that people should have to write these particular inventories and do all of this intensive work. I wrote up something that kept me and my partner up for weeks till 3 in the morning just to try to get a reasonable response on a dwelling where the policy says it's what they're supposed to pay, and they're not willing to pay at all. I think the fact that we are required to hold this burden rather than the state and the insurance commission forcing State Farm and other bad actors to do what they're supposed to do and pay out their policies is a crock. It's ridiculous and it's untenable. And I'm a person that I feel like I'm very privileged because I feel like I can talk somebody down if I need to. But it's painful to be doing this, knowing that we're in a stressful moment. We can't even rebuild or even think about rebuilding because we can't get the resources that we need. We don't even know if we're going to have enough money to rebuild. And most of us are underinsured anyway. It's really atrocious what's happening here. The other thing that I think is really important to say is that it is super important to know that the mortgage company actually, the insurance company is given a check that is to the person and the mortgage company. And I think some clarity around what's acceptable and what isn't needs to happen. This is really important. When you don't even have a mortgage up to the level of what the insurance company is providing to you, should the mortgage company hold that, as you've heard from other people, where you can't even and not give you any interest? Absolutely not. So for me, this is a very sad situation. I feel trapped, to be honest, and it's a situation that I've heard from. Of the 30 people in our community, I think half of them have this provider, and they've all got similar stories, not to mention the stories of all the people that you're hearing from tonight. So this needs to stop, and we need to have some policies and clear regulations for the people of Altadena to build back and build back better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darlene. And continuing on this same theme of insurance and environmental concerns, we've got a few stories left on this topic.
My name is Angela Giacchetti, and I am an Altadena resident and survivor of the Eaton Fire. On the night that the fire began, we left our community, myself, my husband, our dog, our cat, and our 9-month-old baby. And we have been displaced ever since. We lived in the Upper Fair Oaks area, which was very devastated by the fires. The majority of homes burned, and we were astonished to find the next day that our house was still standing. My husband returned to the area and fought the fire himself. He used a shovel to put out hot spots in our yard, turned off our gas as homes around us were still exploding because the gas was still on, and there was no response in our area. We know now that that was really the beginning of a long and arduous recovery. We thought that because we were insured that this process would be, that it wouldn't turn out this way. But very shortly after the fire, our insurance company began pressuring us to return home, despite the fact that we were almost certain that our house was contaminated with lead and other harmful materials, and despite the fact that they had not yet sent a field adjuster to even assess the damage. I had to take my 9-month-old baby down to the Disaster Relief Center and appeal to a representative from the California Fair Plan myself. Since then, they have delayed denied, underpaid us, and in fact, they have denied remediation, which is the most important aspect of us returning home. If I could have one thing right now, it would be accountability for insurance companies, including California Fair Plan, to deliver on their contractual obligations to us as consumers, and really, this is already so hard. It's already so hard to recover from a fire. We need insurance companies to do their jobs, and we need leaders who understand the issues and can hold them accountable as well. Now, I think one of our biggest concerns, both within our house and in the general community, is contamination, which we know is there. And it's just so devastating of a loss, because we moved to Altadena because it was one of the safest places to live in LA County, including environmentally. You know, it had the best air quality in the area. It's one of the few places that you can still live and live more than a mile away from a freeway. And the loss of that is just truly devastating. So, yeah, I hope to see better accountability for insurers, and a cleanup of our beautiful and previously safe Altadena.
Hi, I am Jessie. I live in Altadena, just outside the burn zone, with my husband and 2 children who are 7 and 4. We had our house tested just a month after the fire, and that came back with asbestos, lead, combustible byproduct contamination. It has been a nightmare. We had no guidance from insurance. They did not help us find, a place to live. There was just really no help. So we ended up getting the house tested ourselves, paid for all of that out of pocket, and have just been really fighting and advocating for ourselves the whole time.
Like, how has this affected your kids?
Yeah, well, we've been bouncing around. I think we've lived in 7 houses since January. So they are very dysregulated and miss their things. And we've explained to them that, we do have to throw all their stuff away. That's another piece of it, is kind of going through the house and deciding, like, we're technically supposed to throw away all of our soft goods and all of our clothes because of the contamination, but I have a shirt of my dad's that, is very sentimental to me. So it's making those decisions and deciding what we do keep and what we try and clean. But for the most part, a lot of it's gone. So yeah, that's been hard, but I think the kids are just excited to be home again. There's this feeling of sheer desperation, begging for someone to help us. It's not right, and I don't even know how it's legal to essentially put people in a situation where insurance knows exactly what they're doing. They give you a little and then they stop talking to you for weeks. That gives me hope. I think it's our community. I'm gonna cry.
Oh.
Our community is there when the people that are supposed to be protecting us aren't. And that is what gives me hope. That's truly the only thing that gives me hope, is just, we've stayed at friends' houses. We have each other, we're giving each other information, and just trying our best not to leave anyone behind. We're doing our family dinners every Friday night to make sure that we're all connected, even though we're all living scattered across LA. It's the people of Altadena that give me hope.
Hi.
Hi everybody, my name is Valko Artinian. I am neighborhood captain for Zone 101. I've been a resident of Altadena for 12 years now. My house is near Lincoln and Ventura, and you know, I have survivor's guilt because my house survived and a lot of my neighbors' houses didn't, and I live with that and I struggle with that every day. I'll never forget the first night, the early morning hours, when I realized that the fire that was all the way at Eaton Canyon had somehow made it to West Altadena. Like, my house is literally 6 blocks from JPL, and I couldn't understand how the fires had reached my neighborhood. But I remember that morning, the early hours, just being on my roof with a hose, just trying to save my house, trying to save my neighbors' houses. A lot of our neighborhood did survive, but a lot of the houses, you know, very close to us didn't, and it's just been really difficult. That first couple of days was hell on earth for me. And then the looters after that, for days before the National Guard showed up, my neighbors and I just trying to coordinate and just chasing after looters. I just couldn't believe it, you know, like people preying on others who had just lost everything. I'm just never going to forget that. It was just like one heartbreak after another, and it's just been really difficult. And then spending 2 months as a single dad with kids living out of a hotel was a nightmare. And I'm an attorney, and the first couple of weeks I was just going out into the community and just doing outreach and just, you know, connecting people on social media with like, come here for donations, come here for free food, and it filled my soul up. It gave me purpose, and that's why I decided to become a neighborhood captain, to just continue that and just to give to the community and to connect people. And I believe that there is hope. I believe that there is something beautiful that's rising out of all of these ashes and this destruction. I've seen silver linings where communities are coming together and doing beautiful things. Altadena is a very rich community, a very old community, and I've, for the first time, started to just really realize that, doing outreach and volunteering and connecting with community members, and there's just so much beauty and hope coming out of it. And just if I had to ask one question to the government, it would be, can we please, in my neighborhood, get free testing for lead and asbestos and other chemicals? Because the county is giving it for free in other places, but for some reason in my zone, they're not. And we're literally like a few feet away from just total destruction. We were sitting in that smoke, and you know, car batteries and solar panels and asbestos and lead, it's in our houses too. So yeah, that would be my question to the government. Can we also get that relief from my immediate neighbors? So yeah, with that, I send you all my blessings and love, and just be strong, and we'll get through this together.
Hi everyone, my name's Neil Tyler. I wanted to tell a story about what I've been dealing with State Farm and the structural estimate that they've prepared. Long story short, what State Farm has prepared is a 144-page document in the most minute of detail that supposedly describes and lays out what it costs to rebuild my house on a room-by-room basis. At first glance and hearing that, it sounds like, oh wow, they put in so much work. But this is a deliberate business practice that they've engaged in to try to make it as hard as humanly possible for someone like me who lost everything to get as much money as it costs to rebuild their house from the insurance company and under their policy. The problem is State Farm never took into account any of the specific information about my home. They never looked at any of the specific pictures, over 150, that I shared with them showing what my house looked like. And they used a database with numbers that are way under what it actually costs on a labor and materials basis to build something in California. They've admitted that this program does not represent 2025 prices, and it's in fact national averages and not even Los Angeles prices, which we all know is higher than the rest of the country. So it's taken me about 3 months now to just try to understand all 144 pages, talk with general contractors, talk with people within my network to try to even understand what this 144 pages shows. And I've been going line by line to show all of the various things that are not only underestimated in this, but absolutely missing from these 144 pages. They can range as big as fees for structural plans that are needed for permitting purposes to something as small as electrical outlets. There's not a single electrical outlet in these 144 pages, and we all know you need electrical outlets. So I've been fighting. I've been doing my due diligence. I've been preparing how to respond, and I'll be submitting that soon. But it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of education and patience. And I want to tell everyone, you can do it. There are people out there who can help you. So please keep fighting. Don't give up. Don't just accept what State Farm or another insurer is telling you what it costs to rebuild your home. Your policy says they must replace it, and at the end of the day, they will replace it. To everyone else who's not dealing with this as a survivor, but is in a position to help, please reach out to the people that are dealing with this business practice, because it's going to lead to people giving up when they don't know how to attack these documents that the insurers are throwing in our faces, specifically to try to keep us from getting what we deserve under the policy. I hope that this story resonates with all of you who are watching this, and that everyone keeps strong, keeps fighting, and if you're able to help, please help people like us who are dealing with these business practices. Thank you.
Okay, we have just 7 stories remaining. We're now going to hear stories related to land acquisition and then vulnerable populations. Just 7 stories left. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, I'm Shannon Larsoul, and I'm a neighborhood captain with Altagether for Zone 12, also known as the Floresita Farms area. I'm speaking out today because I want to underscore the importance that a community land trust and a community acquisition fund will play in rebuilding Altadena. Like many Altadenans, my story is not just mine, but the story of generations of my family. My grandparents moved from Pasadena to Altadena in 1968, and my family has been here ever since. In 1972, my great-grandmother followed and also made the move from Pasadena to Altadena. Over the years, Altadena came to become home for my aunts, uncles, cousins, and other extended family members. I have always been so blessed to call this beautiful town my home, and since that fateful night in January, I've had great fear and concern over what the community will come to be. I am one of the lucky ones in that my home was spared in the Eaton Fire, but as we know, our community as a whole is forever changed by this event. Altadena has always celebrated its racial and socioeconomic diversity, and I fear that without strong community acquisition strategies, we will lose this unique part of us. As we know, in the aftermath of natural disasters, our most vulnerable populations are hit hardest, including communities of color, multi-generational homes like my own, renters, and our elders. We have already seen disaster capitalism at play, with almost 50% of sold lots going to corporate buyers, and without immediate community stabilization, the Altadena that we all know and love will cease to exist. That's why I'm calling on our leaders to act now. Since the fire, Altadena residents have been hard at work urging our elected leaders to hear us and to stand with us. We recognize that recovering and rebuilding will take innovative and strategic partnerships between both the government and private sectors. Some of our elected officials, like Senator Sasha Renee Perez and Assemblymember John Harabedian, have listened and have acted by introducing several vital Senate and Assembly bills, including AB 797, SB 782, and SB 658, but the fight is far from over. So, Governor Gavin Newsom, can I count on you to allocate $200 million to Altadena to establish a community acquisition fund?
Hi, I'm Kimberly Berry, Zone 8 Captain, and here's my story. So I thought we had done it. We gathered every single neighbor on our sweet little cul-de-sac in the heart of central Altadena, the glorious part west of Lake. Just days after the fire, our virtual street chat became our new home, growing until every neighbor was accounted for. We even had our first off-the-block party, and it was so good to be together, share how we were feeling, what we loved about our little slice of Altadena. But thinking back, maybe there was like a little tiny rumble of uncertainty about rebuilding, but for the most part, it looked and sounded like all of our neighbors were moving ahead and planning to rebuild. Perhaps we were too optimistic, maybe too naive. But then it hit when I least expected. And reading those words, instantly my stomach dropped. Neighbors started chiming in and commenting and sending their well wishes. But I was really quick to send a private message. and ask, what options have you considered? Would you consider selling to a community option? And the reply was just as swift, no, I won't consider that. I need to get as much money from the sale as possible. I understood, of course, and thanked them and wished them well, but inside I was trembling. It was a harbinger of what was to come and what is still coming. So I say we need a multifaceted approach to keeping land in the hands of the Altadena community, keeping our neighborhoods intact so that we have somewhere to return home to. So some of the things that are currently on the table is to support the $200 million, the ask from the Altadena Community Acquisition Fund to help trusted nonprofits compete against these for-profit speculators and be able to allow people who want to sell and get the highest bidder and not have to compete against people who can pay even more and more and more. So also along those lines is supporting AB 797. In that, there's a sunset clause, and with that sunset clause, it would be great to provide a direct transfer to our local community land trust. So just ensuring that there's like a quick method to keep the land in the community's hands, and then kind of when that period of investment is done, then transferring those over to the community land trust. Also supporting, again, AB 851 to ban unsolicited offers until 2027 and give sellers a recession window after the close of escrow. We want to legislate to limit the number of properties a corporate entity or LLC can purchase. There's not legislation on the table, but there has been a proposal and a petition, so we would like to get that moving. And just when we rebuild, we want to restore familiar landmarks. Our community centers have walkable space. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to working with you on these efforts to help us rebuild.
All right, and now we are on to our last section, 5 stories remaining, all on the theme of vulnerable populations.
Hi, my name's Nicole. I'm an Altadena resident. I'm also a block captain for Altagether. Want to tell you about my neighborhood. There was a guy that would walk his horse down the street every few days, and the horse would stop and eat the grass off our front lawn. And I met Carmen and Daniel when they were walking down the street too, and our other neighbor, Damon, let us know that they have had lemon trees and grapefruit trees in their backyard. And then I told Carmen and Daniel that we had oranges. We had 2 beautiful orange trees that produce the best oranges you've ever had. So then we would trade oranges for grapefruits and lemons with Carmen and Danielle. And then when the fire struck, reaching out to our neighbors, and I just worry about them. They're older than me and want to come back and rebuild so badly, and they're just so overwhelmed with everything that's happening and want to be able to do it in a timely manner. And those are the folks that I worry about in my community. When I messaged Carmen to ask her if I could share the story of our friendship and our relationship, she said yes, and she also texted back and said, también dígales que Leti y usted me dieron alivio en mi preocupación cuando pensé que el Army Corps of Engineers quitarían la parte del jardín del lado izquierdo. ¿Se acuerda? So she wanted me to tell you how we were able to leave her concerns when she was having her debris removal, because she was worried that up her driveway on the left-hand side were some roses that her mother had planted. And she was so worried that they were going to tear them up. And we told them like how great Army Corps was, and if they would just, she would just tell them, to please stay, on the right side when they were pulling up, and they did, and they saved that part of, their driveway. So these are the folks that I worry about. These are the folks that need the most help in our community, our seniors. Thank you.
And our next speaker is live. Hi, Dot. We can see you.
Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Dorothy Wong, and there are so many powerful conversations. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your vulnerability here tonight. Super powerful. And I'm here to just quickly talk about. So again, Dorothy Wong. I lost my home in Altadena along with thousands of our community members. And I know so much that Altadena is such a special place. And a lot of it are from the stories and the people we meet, even now with people whose homes are still standing, and those who are wishing to rebuild, and also what is happening in our streets. Are people coming back? Where are certain people? So I just wanted to bring up, so I'm a block captain also for Altagether, and I've also been on the town council for 7+ years, and I really felt and knew during this fire I was going to stay there till the last minute, and unfortunately there was no warning, and it was really talking to neighbors that really got us to know what was going on. So through this place that we're at in our healing, in our moving forward, we have a long road ahead. And caseworkers, I think from the very beginning, for me personally, I have ADHD. My husband has dyslexia, and we move really well doing things. But when it comes down to the details, the fine details of recovery, it can definitely be difficult. So caseworkers for so many and our elderly are really important. And it's been really amazing to see how our community has come together. Caseworkers taking us through can be our neighbors, our friends, and so much more. It's going to be a long journey. But we really started looking at programs called resilience hubs, community hubs, and they've been happening. The library, people have come together. Juneteenth just happened. Now more than ever, so many businesses are trying to come back. We really need to focus on, what happened to us, our displacement, our housing instability, economic impacts, emotional, community fragmentation, just has been overwhelming. So we are stronger together. And the way that we've been coming together is really hubs, community hubs, which are powerful for us to be able to really work together to find solutions to all of the things that we're going through. So a group of us came together that we're really focusing on environmental, trees, and different issues. And we came up with the Dena Hive Consortium. So I think if we can really stay positive, stay strong for each other, we will do everything we can to leave no one behind and build our resilience together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. All right, we are down to our final 3 speakers. Thanks for staying with us, everybody.
My house was so clean the day it burned. I had done a whole New year, new me thing. I mean, baseboards, the oven, I scrubbed the front door, the whole deal. I don't know if it was that clean when I'd moved in. I had lived in that sunny one-bedroom apartment with this panoramic view of LA for more than 15 years. And if it hadn't burned down, I'd probably lived in it for another 15 years. By the time I saw it on Wednesday morning, the entire second story of mint green cinder block had just evaporated. The whole ground floor was engulfed in flames. They were pouring out of my kitchen windows and the hole where my door used to be. My neighbors and I, a dozen plus families in that one complex, were all renters. And some of us had lived in Altadena for decades, some their whole lives, some just a few years. My neighbors' kids were born there. They were getting the hang of riding their bikes. When your building burns down, your lease ends. There's no further connection. There's nothing to rebuild and nothing to come back to and no legal tie to the home you've lived in. It's just gone. For renters in Altadena who number in the thousands, I mean, we're probably 40% of the Altadena community, the aftermath of the fire has been particularly hard. As one of the organizers from the Altadena Tenants Union, I want to share with you what I hear every day from our neighbors. And I know more of them would be here to share their stories, except most of them are working and trying to figure out childcare and elder care and scrambling to make ends meet. I've heard just in this past week alone, I can't find housing anywhere because everything is too expensive and I don't know where I'm going to go. We're living in our car. Almost 6 months after the fire, I still haven't gotten my security deposit back from my landlord after our house burned down, and I don't have the time or energy or money to file a lawsuit or figure it out. We've heard my landlord wants to evict me so they can raise the rent for new tenants, and I've lived in that house for 16 years. My landlord wants to evict me because they don't want to deal with remediation. My landlord won't tell me when I can come back home and everything is still covered in smoke and soot and ash. Tenants and renters in Altadena need two things. First, we need regular infusions of direct cash aid with no strings attached. Altadena folks are smart and they're creative and they are experts in how to rebuild their own lives. They don't need to jump through a million hoops or fill out a bunch of forms. They just need cash. Secondly, we need state and county government to step up and protect renters by enforcing existing laws, by adopting an immediate rent and eviction freeze, and by identifying options for immediate housing that don't require years-long wait lists or tons of red tape. People need places to live and enough money to make it right now. Renters and tenants are a part of the Altadena community and always have been. Every single one of us had a home in Altadena on January 6th, and those homes were no less our homes because we didn't own them. Don't treat us like we're disposable people. We have been, and we want to be again, your neighbors.
My name is Breeza Page. My friends call me Breezy. And I am a two-time survivor of the Eaton Fires. I want to share a few thoughts on the recent fire and what has followed. In 1993, when I was just 9 years old, my family was evacuated the first time. Back then, I saw firefighters battling the flames. This year, I only saw police officers going door to door evacuating residents. That contrast speaks volumes. We need to fund the fire department the way that we fund the police department. You can't shoot a fire, and when there are no firefighters, we all lose. We know that controlled burns, long used in indigenous land stewardship, could have prevented the fires in 1993, 2025, and likely future disasters. We are in a climate crisis catastrophe, largely because we abandoned those practices. As a multi-family property owner, I have been told that I have until June 30th in order to remove all of the fire debris privately. My team of 7 is now a team of 2. Work that should have taken a day is now taking 5. Since June 6th, it's as if my neighborhood, once full of life and recovery after the fires, has now become a ghost town. No one is working on anything. Everything is at a standstill. The cause? Ice raids. They've gutted the entire community overnight. Local mom and pop shops that barely survived COVID were devastated by the fires, and now whatever customers remained are afraid to leave their house. Back in January, the National Guard was deployed to protect us from looting. Now ICE agents and bounty hunters contracted by them roam our neighborhoods protected by the same guard. Who's protecting our workers, our families, our neighbors? Can the National Guard be activated to protect us from the raids the same way that they were activated to protect us from looting? Can local police offer any protection from ICE the way that they mobilized during the fires? Will there be any grace periods on any of the city and county deadlines due to these raids? We need to advocate for the day laborers, the housekeepers, the babysitters, and landscapers who are the backbone of our community, but now are too afraid to go outside. Can we suspend parking enforcement for now? Can we put a pause on the court dates in Pasadena? And more than anything, can we organize to protect our own communities without being penalized for it? We are not helpless. In fact, we know how to organize now more than ever. So can you please support us the way that we have supported you? And please remember, we had a fire in January. We don't need ice in June. Nosotros tenemos un incendio en enero. No necesitamos hielo en junio. Adelante. My name is Brisa Page.
Hi, my name is Marisol Espino. I'm a lifelong Altadena resident and I serve as a neighborhood captain. After the fire, my family of 7, like so many others, was scattered. My 84-year-old father now lives with my sister and her kids, and I visit when I can. Not long ago, I took him to a doctor's appointment in Pasadena. We're growing concerned about his memory and asked for a referral to a neurologist. After the appointment, he asked if I could take him somewhere. He couldn't name it at first, just said it was where he got his wallet, the one that he still has, with all of his important cards. As he talked, I realized he meant Dollar King, the discount store near our old house, but it burned down in the fire. I told him gently that it was gone, but he looked confused. So I said I'd take him there and I'd show him. We drove north on Lake, and as we got closer, he seemed sure. Here, yes, it's right here, he said. I pulled into a lot, or what's left of it. Chain link fence, debris, crews moving through what used to be. I stopped the car. He stared at the emptiness, and then the sadness came. Watching him process that loss, again, broke something in me I didn't know could break. Since the fire, I've felt lost, disconnected from my streets, my routines, the places that made life feel like mine. But that day, I really understood what it must be like for him. At 84, trying to hold on to memory and losing not just people or things, but the landmarks that helped him stay oriented in this world. He's not just missing home. He's lost without it. As we kept driving, I explained how far the fire had reached. He kept scanning the streets, double-checking, making sure the fire hadn't followed us further east, where we now live separately. This reminded me, recovery isn't just about rebuilding houses. It's about people, especially our seniors. We need our leaders and planners to recognize that older adults aren't just vulnerable. They are vital. They hold the memory of this place. Recovery must include housing, mental health care, and familiar spaces that allow them to age with dignity, somewhere that still feels like home. Hi, my name
All right, that is the end of our speakers. Thank you all so much for being here with us to hear directly from people who urgently need to be heard by people who are making decisions on their behalf. We will be following up with everybody who was invited to this event with a recording, as well as with a link to the full list of calls to action assembled from our neighborhood captains and from our partner organizations who are working on the ground here in Altadena. We thank you so much for giving your time to listen. As I said at the beginning, it is a sign of respect and of care for you to be here tonight. But if you're in a position of power, we need you to do more than listen. We need you to harness the anger and the frustration and the pleas that you have heard here tonight and let that fuel action. Share the recording with the media, send it to elected officials that you know or that you work with, hold decision makers accountable. These people and our community are owed nothing less. We have a neighborhood captain named Aaron. Aaron lost his house in the Eaton Fire, and along with his house, he lost 40 years worth of video work. But something that he did not lose is his collection of bird sounds that he had recorded at his house up near the top of lake. He's shared them with us tonight as a reminder of how beautiful and special this place is. So we're going to leave you with those bird sounds tonight. We hope you have a really good night and that you carry these stories into your work. Thank you.